Israeli hostage Avera Mengistu is alive. On Monday, Hamas released an unverified video of the captive. The man in the clip appeals to Israel for help. Avera Mengistu is one of the two hostages held by the terror group. In 2014, Mengistu, whose family says suffers from mental illness, crossed into northern Gaza and was quickly captured. Fruitless negotiations have been ongoing for years, with Hamas now demanding a decent price for the prisoners. Is Hamas hoping for a Gilad Shalit-style prisoner swap? The 2011 deal saw 1,027 Palestinian security prisoners, some convicted terrorists, exchanged for one Israeli soldier. Are such deals too risky? Should governments negotiate with terrorists in the first place?
So let's get to it. Should governments negotiate with terrorists? As always, we begin with our quick-fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we pick up the conversation from there. So, Mr. Sinijlawi, please take the lead.
Well, it depends how do you define terrorists, because I guess now inside the Israeli cabinet, there are people who have been convicted of terrorism in the past. So in this conflict, you will not find angels. We don't have Mother Teresa's, not on Palestinians, not on the Israeli side. Most of the Palestinians consider those who are heading the Israeli army and the Israeli security agencies as terrorists, committing crimes, war crimes. So it depends. But I think in this case, prisoner swap is a win-win situation.
Okay, Samuel, we'll put a stop right here, but we'll continue from this point in a second. Mr. Cristal, your thoughts?
Thank you. First, just to correct, they were not convicting terrorism, but supporting terrorism, but it doesn't matter. The question is not whether we should negotiate with terrorists, because any government around the world negotiate with terrorists. Negotiation is neither an ideology nor a policy, just an instrument to get what you want. Of course, Israel should negotiate, because negotiate brings a lot of value. Whether Israel should conclude a deal like the Shalit deal, I don't think so.
Okay, Mr. Dangot, beg to differ?
I think that the negotiation is on the table without any contact, whether it's running well or not well. It's something as a duty to the Israeli government, to the IDF, to bring back the soldiers to the country, and also the problem with the two illegal prisoners. What I think is now Hamas is weak. Hamas shows his weakness, what they showed yesterday in the TV. The new Israeli government, new Israeli Prime Minister, new Israeli Minister of Defense, new Israeli Chief of Staff must reorganize now the structure, and I think should be negotiated under some principle of conditions. First, no prisoners with blood on their hands. Secondly, humanitarian prisoners or others can be released, and other humanitarian steps.
Okay, gentlemen, let's feel free to interact from this point onwards, and I would like to begin with this list of conditions, plural, Major General Dangot just mentioned. Mr. Cristal, when arriving to a negotiation framework with so many preconditions, can anything really bear fruit, or both sides know, we come with our prejudices, but we're willing to, to dismiss them if and when?
Well, I think that there is a professional maybe wording. These are not preconditions. These are the boundaries or the guidelines for the deal. As I mentioned, and I agree with Major General Dangot, of course, let's say the quality of the assets at the hand of Hamas at the moment falls short for any substantial deal like they had with the Shalit deal. It's very clear that they have two illegal prisoners, as Major General Dangot mentioned, and I agree, and two remains of Israeli soldiers. This should be, if at all deal will be reached, this should be in consideration for a humanitarian prisoners of Hamas, or Palestinian prisoners, which will be released, maybe very, very sick or very, very old. people. It should be a humanitarian-based deal. I cross out the word precondition, but rather the guidelines or the substance of any possible deal.
Yeah, terminology definitely key when approaching negotiations at table. But Mr. Sinijlawi, usually terror groups, and I do take note of the definition of terrorism that you've mentioned, are working by the modus operandi, if you will, of no free lunches. We will not be releasing any signal of life without any cost or price, rather. Why did Hamas deviate from this policy? Is it a show of weakness or strength at this point in time?
Well, I think Hamas was waiting for the Israeli elections because during the last weeks of Lapid was keen to close a deal, and they were very close to have a deal on the presidential exchange. But what prevented this is that the elections, that he didn't want to do it at his last days. So Hamas was waiting for a new government to be in place, and they saw that already now the government is functioning, and they wanted to signal something to Netanyahu that let's bring this issue again on the table. I think Netanyahu is also keen to do this deal. He wants such a move to happen. The only obstacle that is remaining, what is the price that should be paid by the Israeli side? Israel is giving a lot of signals to Hamas that what you have does not worth for the big price you are asking for. And Hamas will never do a deal without having all its prisoners out. They don't have the courage. They don't have the means to close such a deal and leaving most of their leaders inside the jail. So, in a way or another, as their spokesman said today in Al Jazeera, you are forcing us to include more prisoners in our hands and then negotiate with you. Let's close this deal. Don't push us into a situation that we are forced to have more Israelis into our hands.
Major General Dangot, PR-wise, so to speak, can we already declare some sort of a success for Hamas for hijacking Israeli discourse?
I don't see any kind of success of Hamas in this case. I see a weakness, and I think that Hamas published the first movie on July, and that was before the election, 4 months. They wanted to press for a result. Now again, they are pressing for a result because 2 months from now it's the Ramadan. Hamas is not going to make any kind of escalation with Israel because they have a loss of price if they are doing it. Hamas is trying to make something to strengthen his power around the West Bank, or also their duty towards their prisoners, especially Sinwar, towards his close friends from the day of the prison. I think we should involve in this kind of negotiation also, as in the past, the Egyptian. Unfortunately, the Qatarian are not playing a fair game in this or in other fields as well, so we don't have to trust them. Those who are giving a shelter in their capital to a terrorism movement, and we have to also use the ambassador from the United Nations. I believe that Hamas has to make, and they are on the way, by the way, because Israel showed strength in its policy. We have to bring back the soldiers, the sons. We have to bring back the illegal prisoners. By the way, we have to make the delegitimation for Hamas by holding such illegal prisoners with a problem of mentalic problem that are a tool to press on Hamas itself.
Yes, we're talking about a civilian, not a soldier here, just a reminder. Yes. Mr. Cristal, are questions over authenticity of the video a fog tactic, so to speak, from Israel's standpoint?
Well, I think that Israel cannot really 100% control the public discourse, but the family really approved with a little bit of doubt, which is an authentic doubt about the authenticity of the video. And Israel uses this type of unclear and delaying any substantial message, as Major General Dangot said. This is a show of weakness on behalf of Hamas. It's the third proof of life or indicator that they sent without any, price, any token exchange. Yeah. And this is definitely changes the dynamic. We have to remember, and Hamas knows it better than anyone, that the cost of bodies and the cost of two mentally ill Israeli citizens is not something that the Israeli, definitely these days, the divided Israeli society will be willing to pay any price. And Sinwar has to send a message to his friend in prison: if you want, please wait, because no significant deal with the current assets on behalf of Hamas will be reached in the nearest future.
And Mr. Sinijlawi, we're talking about Hamas, Israel, Hamas. Will any prisoner swap or mere negotiations between Hamas and Israel be the nail on the Palestinian Authority's coffin?
Well, I don't think so. Maybe there will be some kind of credit to Hamas. The issue of the Palestinian prisoners is very, very important, very sensitive. You should understand that the way the Palestinian society sees these prisoners, they are heroes in front of the Palestinian society. The Palestinian society does not believe that the judicial system in Israel, the military judicial system that put them into prison, is a fair system. So in a way or another, every Palestinian, every family is looking for these people to be released. So there will be a lot of credit to Hamas, especially that among some leaders inside the prison are very important leaders inside Fatah, like Marwan Barghouti and others. So in a way, it will gain credit. But let me emphasize why it is a win-win situation. Without getting into this mathematical calculation, good price, bad price, we are not now buying merchandise in the market. This is a political step. It is a win-win situation because, in a way, Israel will help to cool down the situation, give a long or short-term, medium-term truce with Hamas. Hamas will be very sensitive into taking any major steps against the Israelis after such a deal. It will create a lot it will create some credibility to the new Israeli government in front of the international community, moving in such a step unexpectedly from such a right-wing government will be seen as an asset, as a good signal to the international community. Yes. And it has been proven that those prisoners who are released tend to be moderate, not extreme.
Okay, Sama, we have to take a break, but we will continue to discuss the new Benjamin Netanyahu policy. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Major General in the Reserves Eitan, Dangot, Moty, Cristal, and Sinijlawi. Thank you, gentlemen, very much here for staying with us. We're also staying on topic, but before we dive back into the conversation, let's take a listen to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the release of the video, saying Hamas bears our responsibility. But can we read anything between the lines there? Let's take a listen.
I am now finishing a visit to the Shin Bet base. I was deeply impressed by the technology, the people, the methods, and above all the actions that foil hundreds of terrorist attacks and save the lives of many, many people in the state of Israel. I deeply appreciate it. I want to emphasize something else. Israel is continuing its efforts to bring back Avera Mengistu and the rest of our captives and missing people. Yesterday we received further confirmation of what we knew all along, that Avera is alive. This is a young man not in good health, and the responsibility for his fate rests entirely on Hamas.
So let's begin with another quickfire round, 30 seconds each. Is Hamas feeling more comfortable, perhaps, negotiating with Benjamin Netanyahu, or more specifically, will Benjamin Netanyahu change the status vis-a-vis the Palestinians? Major General Dangot, please take the lead.
I think that Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed that the movie yesterday shows us that Mengistu is alive. That is one important thing. Secondly, he continued to to bring the message that the Israeli government is responsible to bring back this soldier as a duty to the families, as a duty of commanders. What will be under bring us to the first question of when we start this kind of conversation. What I think that the Israeli government is open. Hamas should know that Israel is intent to do it, but they should change the concept of the negotiation and their demands.
Yeah.
I believe that they can do it till the Ramadan.
Okay, Sinijlawi, your thoughts?
Technically, any prime minister can change the status vis-a-vis the Palestinians if he has the political will. Now, Netanyahu is having on his agenda to reach to Saudi Arabia peace, to include Saudi Arabia in the Abraham Accords. And this will not happen without the Palestinians. So I think his desire to be the prime minister that made peace with Saudis and maybe get the Nobel Peace Prize will let him always take into consideration how he's going to be able to solve things with the Palestinians. So technically, he has the power.
Last but not least, Mr. Cristal, your thoughts?
Well, the question, the way it is framed, is very easy. Why Hamas does prefer to negotiate with Netanyahu? Because Hamas has a very good experience negotiating with Netanyahu. Because Netanyahu completed the Shalit deal, which was a huge victory for Hamas. Because Netanyahu policy was to pay Hamas for a ceasefire, which was changed by the previous government, and because Hamas knows that Netanyahu is held hostage by his extremist political partner. So Hamas finds Netanyahu a very comfortable partner.
So let's feel free to interact from this point onwards and continue from this point that Mr. Cristal is making, and you've alluded to that in the previous part of our debate as well. So let me ask clearly, was the Shalit deal a mistake for Israel?
The Shalit, I want to be very careful or cautious when speaking about Shalit deal, because I was part of the negotiating team to some part of the negotiations. I would say it very clear from my opinion. I think that Israel paid too high price for the Shalit deal. We could have reached a much cheaper deal 2 years before. The political reality didn't allow it from several reasons. But by the end of the day, Israel paid a significant cost for the Shalit deal, which actually traumatized public opinion, let alone because of the fact that many of the prisoners went back to terror. And Israel will not repeat the Shalit deal unless circumstances will change dramatically.
Major General Dangot.
I also was that time on a duty as the coordinator of government activities, and I escorted this process while I was military secretary to the Minister of Defense. But I can tell you that it's very difficult and unfair to judge it from the point we are now after a few years. If you remember the time, as Moty said, the public opinion was very strong and led the situation. On the other hand, what we know that we missed and we were weak, and what we pay, unfortunately, a bloodshed after it, was won by the Israel Security Service, by the Shabak. So if you ask me, it was a lesson for that time. There is a main principle today not to repeat it. I'm not sure. We have to judge any case from the start point, and so I cannot make it clearly it was a mistake or not, but unfortunately we have a very strong lessons from this case.
And Mr. Sinijlawi, to that point, can too much public discourse undermine negotiations? And from both sides of the divide, I'm asking you to exercise your analytical skills, as in the more public pressure, the less negotiation leverage?
Of course, there is an influence on the public opinion, but I disagree on what both guests have said, that Israel has paid a heavy price. I see that in the contrary, having a person like Sinwar out of prison has helped a little bit create a pragmatic stream inside Hamas. He's the guy that has helped into changing all the articles in the Hamas convention that were calling for the destruction of Israel. It was Sinwar. And it is Sinwar now that is leading an indirect channel of negotiation with Israel. It wasn't existing before Sinwar. Now it's clear that through the mediators like the representative of the UN or the Egyptians, Hamas is engaged into negotiations with Israel. And now Hamas also, after Sinwar was released, accepted to commit itself to the Arab Peace Initiative, which calls for 2 states, for a Palestinian state on the borders of 67.
Yeah.
This is a lot of political development inside Hamas. And I think if this deal happens, there will be a lot of fresh blood of leadership coming to Hamas and also to Fatah, that has a crisis in its leadership, that will help stabilize things and open channels for more diplomatic development. I don't see that it was the reason of releasing some prisoners that caused an escalation of a security.
Yeah.
Security escalation is happening by itself. The weather is there, that emphasizing more Palestinians to be engaged in violent actions. It's not the release itself. It's the political environment, the occupation itself that motivate people to turn to violence.
Okay, in the short time we have left, gentlemen, all of you with some serious hands-on experience behind the scenes. So let me ask you very simply, the ball, where's the court? Where's the ball? Who will take it forward or not at this point in time, Mr. Cristal?
I don't think that the negotiation will make a significant progress under the current government, under the current circumstances. If there will be an unfortunate military escalation in the West Bank or in Gaza, probably, and the Israeli leadership will be smart enough to include settlement of the prisoners, of the prisoners exchange, within the context of a ceasefire, that would open. But as a standalone stream, I don't see Netanyahu leading any breakthrough in this political prisoners, in this prisoners exchange.
Well, it may be a bit counterintuitive, but this long-standing notion of expanding the scope of negotiations in order to solve a problem, meaning adding more problems to the boiling pot in order to reach a breakthrough, might be very much applicable this time around as well. Mr. Sinijlawi, Mr. Moty, Cristal, and Major General in the Reserves, Eitan, Dangot, thank you all so very much for your time and insight this evening. Hopefully we'll see you back on the show